There are times when an undertext is controversial, and that often happens with biblical things. We're trying to image right now, we're negotiating with the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris to image the oldest Quran. And I have a colleague at Cornell who'd written a book on this particular Quran, and what he seems to, he's found and he suspects to be scratch outs and overwriting, which isn't usual in the Quran. And it's Quran 416. It has to do with inheritance and the right of women versus men to inherit.
This is big.
Well, what he discovered and what he suspects, and I think that we could confirm if we imaged, if we were allowed to image, is that the pronouns which indicate, which were written over, which are male, in fact, were not originally male.
Welcome, Greg.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. And how would you describe, now you do many things, but when you introduce yourself, what do you say? Who are you?
I've invented a title for myself. I call myself an English professor, but also a professor of textual science.
Mm-hmm.
And textual science, I need to develop a term for the discipline that I'm in, because what I use is imaging science, some forensic science, and then traditional, philological skills like paleography, which is the ability to read old texts, codicology, the history of the book and how books are put together to try to figure out where they're from and what materials they're made out of. And ultimately, so, I needed to be able to have a word which kind of describes what it's like to have a bunch of skills which recover damaged or lost texts.
But really what you're saying is you're the new version of Indiana Jones in real life.
A while ago, I gave a TED talk in which I had an Indiana Jones slide. And the thing is that he was actually a terrible scholar. He really was.
Yeah.
So although that's a lot of fun, and we do get to travel quite a lot, what we do is more on the conservation side. And what he did was more on the exploitation side.
Am I ever going to get to read Homer's Marguerites?
When I used to teach at the University of Mississippi, and they had a collection, the Robinson Collection, which was a variety of objects which had been owned by a former Harvard professor, and he'd given some of it to the University of Mississippi for his wife had lived in Oxford, Mississippi, and the curators didn't know what they had. They looked; it was in a box. He had a bunch of things with poor provenance, which is the case today and always has been. And one of them happened to be an unknown fragment of a poem by Sappho. And they sold it, not knowing what it was.
Right.
So my answer to you, a long answer to a short question, is maybe it's already out there.
Right. We're talking about Homer's, there's the known works, and then he supposedly wrote a comedy, and there's a few fragments, but I don't know how funny it was or really, there's no way to know.
Well, we have imaged a previously unknown play by Menander, comedy by Menander, the new comedian, and that the edition hasn't yet come out, but we did that for a while ago at the Vatican, and there are other objects like that lurking, and they can lurk in a variety of places. Sometimes they're entirely totally lost, but sometimes they're in palimpsests, so these manuscripts that are erased and then written over, and with careful imaging we can recover a good lot of them.
Now
I think it's important that people understand kind of what you're doing, because to me it's so magical when you sort of see the visualizations, and it's kind of just give a sense, because you and Jesse are talking about works that are thousands of years old, and we're talking about a process that you developed and created to kind of make sure where we can, if something feels like it's fading or lost, you have this process which can actually we can actually see what was originally created, which is really unbelievable.
Well, the process that we use mostly is multispectral imaging. You can reuse a variety of other kinds of imaging techniques, but this one is about 100 years old, maybe actually a little older than that. And the new digital versions of it are what we've really perfected, I think, into a kind of mature method for going out into the field, taking a variety of photographs of an object under various wavelengths of light, including not just the visible, but the invisible, that is UV at the shorter end and the infrared at the longer end. And kind of like, if you wear IR goggles or infrared goggles at night and you can see things that you never see, it's the same way with actually every wavelength of light. Every wavelength of light reveals something slightly different, sometimes radically different, about an object that has been damaged. And often what happens is that manuscripts are, they suffer over the years all sorts of insults, from mold to water damage to fading, to scraping off and rewriting, lots of things, chemical reagents. And the multispectral imaging process enables us to see through or behind damage, kind of back in time. It also enables us sometimes to see changes that the author or the scribe, him or herself, actually made, so that we have the first version of things.
Like with Thomas Jefferson, yeah?
Yes, exactly. So that's one of the many examples of
Could you tell
changes
us that,
of mind.
Could you tell us that one?
Yeah, well, this was a project done by my colleagues, Roger Easton and Bill Christens-Barry at the Library of Congress. And they had imaged a copy of the Declaration of Independence in Jefferson's own hand. And they'd noticed that one word was scratched out and overwritten. And what they could read, the overwriting, it said citizens. And the head of the Library of Congress asked the team to image multispectrally. And they were able to recover the text that was underneath and see enough of it to be able to conjecture exactly what it said. And what they realized was that it said subjects. And really what you see is, Jefferson's thoughts about American democracy evolving as he's writing. And some of these changes of mind are really significant for history. The same thing happens with versions of the Bible too.
Yeah,
you found the oldest version of the Bible, didn't you?
Well, I just want to say one quick, and then that is just a remarkable thing to ponder right now, particularly in the United States, when we're thinking about what is democracy, and the words matter, and everything that you say, and going from subjects, which would be part of Europe, and European people are subject to the kind of democracy. I just think that's such a profound and people should.
Yeah, a vertical hierarchy, politics envisioned as a vertical hierarchy, to one envisioned primarily as a horizontal relationship. That we are equals, and it's all very true that one change in one word can really alter meanings. We often work with Bibles, and one of the things that I've realized is the Bible is an ongoing work. It was written over hundreds of years, both the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible, and that little changes of meaning, little misunderstandings can be of enormous consequence. I'm thinking of one passage in St. Jerome's translation of the Vulgate, in which he incorrectly translated from the Greek. The original Greek was in Paul is me hypsilophrone. He translated that as noli altum sapere in Latin, which means do not seek to know things on high. And this idea really affected Christian science for 1,000 years. Don't seek to know things that are in God's realm, and therefore don't explore the heavens. Don't, mess with chemistry, or do so at your own peril, as Galileo later learned. In fact, that's not what the passage means. Me hypselo phronei means, phronesis is thought. Do not think with high thoughts. Don't be haughty, is what he said. And a simple change in a phrase like that inhibits 1,000 years of scholarly investigations into the world.
Jerome, do you think I think he probably did that with purpose. I mean, he's sort of, do you think he did it accidentally, or do you think he did it with purpose? Because it's so much of what he does is.
I think he did it accidentally. I mean, you'd mentioned that we'd worked on the oldest translation of the Gospels into Latin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Codex Vercellensis, held in Vercelli in Italy, and made there probably in the first half of the 4th century.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really badly damaged text. But what's interesting about it is it represents the version of the Christian Bible that is closest to what we had at the time of the Council of Nicaea, at the time when really the Christian church was conceived as a political entity under Constantine,
right,
in which its rules, therefore, became the rules of the law of the land. And so it's really important to know that the Old Latin Bible, what did they understand by the Old Latin Bible? Are there other mistakes of this sort or changes in vocabulary? Because there is so much consequence to a simple change, a little change. So that's important.
That first version of the Bible, how much do you sense Aristotle or other philosophers in that first version before we've sort of did away with all of that later?
That's a good question. The scholars that I'm working on finishing my transcription of Matthew. A couple other scholars I'm working with are editing. Annette Weissenrieder is editing the what's called the Vetus tradition, which is the Old Latin Bible before Jerome's translation. And there are a variety of differences. Some of them small and some of them not small. There are portions that are left out. I don't know if the scholarship is advanced to the point where we can say with certainty that we can see in the Codex Vercellensis, a sculpting mind. More work needs to be done.
So you're working with ultraviolet, and then one day how do you come to meet Roger Easton, and what's the thought process? Do you know immediately that this is something different because are you just not getting the result you want in ultraviolet? And so, what occurs? What's the magical thing that brings you two together?
Well, I had been working between 2004 and 2009. I'd been working to edit the last important long poem in Old French that had never been edited before. It existed in only complete or near complete in only one version that was badly damaged in the bombing of Dresden.
That's the Chess of Love?
Yes, that's the Essai d'Amour. And it's very, very long. And it's fascinating and complicated. I had been using the techniques that scholars have been using for, a good 80 years, which is you go and you open the manuscript and you look at it with a special UV lamp and a magnifying glass. And then you try to, decipher what you can decipher. And then you transcribe it. And after a point, I realized that I wasn't getting anything more. And I did what lots of people do, which is, they look online to figure out what the state of science is. What other recourse do I have? And that's when I found out about Roger Easton's work on the Archimedes palimpsest. And he and another scholar, Keith Knox, imaging scientist Keith Knox, had used multispectral imaging and a new digital method and digital algorithms to image and then do a lot of really good image processing, because multispectral imaging isn't just about image capture. That's about maybe 15 to 20% of the job. Then comes the image processing, which in itself is an art. They and Bill Christens-Barry had developed these techniques, and I contacted them, and together Roger and I, with his help, I wrote a grant to the U.S. government to develop a transportable version of multispectral imaging, and we took it to Dresden, Germany, where I was on sabbatical, and where the object is, and we imaged, and at that time, I thought it was it was just primarily a research project, but because it was really fascinating, I took some students along. And we got some great results. But when Roger and I and the students were talking afterwards, we realized that the whole thing was just as important, perhaps more important, as a teaching tool. The students got really involved, really excited, and they learned a lot. And it was at that point that I realized that I somehow needed to be able to use this new system that the government had paid for again and again, and then to develop some kind of curriculum around it to involve students, because there are so many objects that are damaged and that in the next 50, 100 years are going to disappear, that we need to train a new generation of scholars who have the skills, both on the technical side and on the philological, humanistic side. And so that's why I developed textual science.
Take me through what, okay, you're going to go to Germany, which I imagine you've been to before, but is it 2 cases? Is it 10 cases? Is it, what are in those boxes? And you're describing a process, an artistic process, where at first you're going to capture the image, then you're going to analyze the image, then I think you're going to use artificial intelligence to even tell you more about the image.
We've done some experiments on AI, and that's coming along with neural networks. We can talk about that later.
So what are the stages, like when you first, because you're going to take this thing to the Vatican, you're going to take to all sorts of dusty, strange places, because you're not going to go to Mali and just say, hey, let me throw all this stuff in a box and bring it to America, right? So what's this, how much stuff do you have to bring in? Where are some of the places you've gone with it?
Well, I'll start with the stuff. Basically, you're taking a camera with a set of light panels, a copy stand, and later we developed a particular kind of cradle for manuscripts. And I put them in a golf bag and some duffel bags. I can actually carry it all myself, and I have on a couple of occasions.
And when you go through customs, are people like, what is all this stuff? Or do you have to register it before it goes through, like all that kind of stuff?
I have to be very careful because it's expensive to take all this stuff. And so I was coming back from Italy once, actually, and I had all my I had a bunch of equipment in a golf bag, and they wanted a lot of money for that golf bag. And I said, but it's a golf bag. And I said, that should be I should get a special price for a golf bag. And they said, well, all right, fine. So they let me go. And about 15 minutes later, as I was about to cross into the past customs, I hear footsteps, and stop that man. And they came after me. They said, you lied to me. And I said, what? You don't have golf equipment in there. And I said, I never said I had golf equipment. I said, it was a golf bag.
Yeah.
And then he said, well, you owe me money. And I said, no, it's a golf bag. And I said, would you have charged me less money if I had a putter in there? He said, yes. And I said, so in other words, any golfing equipment that was in there along with the camera stuff, you would have charged me that lesser rate. He said, yes. I said, so like a golf ball? Yes, he said. And I said, I submit to you that a golf bag itself is essential golf equipment. There was a long pause, and he said, 170 euros. And after that, and since then, I have always taken a lime green plastic putter and put that in my equipment. But we've taken that all over the place. We've taken it to Sardinia, to the mountains outside Georgia on the Russian border and the Caucasus.
Now that's a very special place there. That you went to the monastery there, yeah?
Well, we went to a monastery,
right.
In Ushguli, which is the highest inhabited place in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do any imaging there, but we did imaging in Mestia,
mm-hmm.
which is in Svaneti. And Svaneti is this almost magical mountainous region right between Russia and Georgia, the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. And they have their own language. It's not written down, Svan. About 20,000 people speak it, and they have their own mythology, going back actually to Medea. Medea was from Svaneti. And while we're there, you make these amazing discoveries. While we were there and imaging manuscripts, we learned actually what the Golden Fleece was. And it's a fascinating opportunity.
Well, what was it?
Yeah,
you want to know?
The
I can't believe it's hanging like that.
The cliffhanger.
Well, the Golden Fleece, Georgia had been known in before the Common Era, about 600 BCE, as a center for gold working. Why? Because the Caucasus Mountains were rich with gold, and what you'd have to do is pan for gold in the mountains, these sluices that would come down the mountainside. You saw them. We almost got washed off a mountain once by one. And what they do for that is they would take a sheep's skin, and they would simply stick it in the water in one of these sluices, and little flakes of gold would get caught in it over time. And when you pull it out, it would shine in the sun with all these flakes of gold. And that is indeed the Golden Fleece. And there were many of them.
Wow.
I have a question, Gregory. When you the moment when, so just getting back to the process, because are you seeing language emerge, or, kind of partial manuscripts? And are you in the room? I hate to say that word happens. I mean, you there when it happens? Do you, or is it something you get a call and one of your colleagues says, okay, it's coming through? Like how quickly does it burn?
Well, when we image, we're in a dark room. We do a lot of traveling, and people say, oh, what's it like in, I don't know, Svaneti? And we'll say, oh, it's dark, flashing lights on. The lights go off in sequence, sometimes up to 40 shots per page or per side. What one person once called kind of like fireworks in slow motion. And if you look carefully, certainly with the UV and the blue bands that provoke fluorescence, you can actually see sometimes text appearing. But in fact, what happens after each capture for each side is about 5 minutes. And there are people who are doing the material handling, that is making sure that the manuscript is placed on the cradle, that it's held flat. And then someone who's running the computer, and we take turns. And then you look at the image you capture on the computer, and you quickly triage and look through the images to see if everything's fine. And that's when you make your first. You have a sense of how well it's going to go and what's going to be revealed. Then all the images are passed on to the image processors, who are often waiting in another room, and they start working immediately on those images to try to improve them.
Now, when you come into a place and you're going to handle one of these books probably hasn't been opened in a few hundred years. I mean, all these books are not handled very often. So is that negotiation difficult with the person who's holding the books?
That's an interesting question. It really depends on the curator. much of what we have to do is developing relationships in which people gradually come to trust you with an object. These objects, most of them are priceless. I mean, really just simply priceless.
Yeah.
So they have to have a sense that you know how to treat them properly, that when you image them, you won't be doing any harm, that when you image them, you're not going to try to take the data, that those data, the images belong, at least for us, they always belong to the owner of the object. Legally, you know, the copyright laws are a little bit odd. When you take an image of something and the image process enables you to see something totally different, you could assert rights to it. We never do. And I think that that relationship is really important.
No.
Is there ever a moment where you discovered something and the holder, the owner, didn't like what you found? In other words, there was text underneath, or there was that, you know, they had a different idea about why they might have wanted to, you know, have that object. Have you ever had anything like that?
Owners are usually thrilled if you can discover anything more about their manuscripts, because it makes the objects much more valuable. So we've done that for a variety of also early modern objects, which we've been able to figure out who had owned it. And when it's, you know, we figured out something was owned by the Lord Mayor of London under Henry VIII, and it was a text which had political, you know, overtones and it had some underlining in it. And suddenly that changed the value of the text from something that the archive had bought for $15,000 to something that was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. There are times when an undertext is controversial. And that often happens with biblical things. We're trying to image right now, we're negotiating with the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris to image the oldest Quran. And I've a colleague at Cornell who'd written a book on this particular Quran, and what he seems to, he's found and he suspects to be scratch outs and overwriting, which isn't usual in the Quran. And it's Quran 416. It has to do with inheritance and the right of women versus men to inherit.
This is big.
Well, what he discovered and what he suspects, and I think that we could confirm if we imaged, if we were allowed to image, is that the pronouns which indicate, which were written over, which are male, in fact, were not originally male.
That's a major world finding amazing piece of information if you can get it.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I think that the Bibliothèque Nationale would be thrilled, but it wouldn't be so great for you know, some adherents. They would find that perhaps an adulteration of a text, or they would certainly be suspicious.
Well, they would probably attribute that to the devil anyways, right?
Well, I think it's fascinating to think of the implications, though.
You know, so there are all these libraries at the edge of, you know, what used to be the Holy Roman Empire. You know, they're so you go to a place that has a different name for the country now, but it was the Roman Empire. So do you find these things in those places, and how do you know, like, if there's you know, thousands of documents and thousands of books there, how do you cue in on what you're going to actually look at?
We come to projects in a variety of ways. Often scholars contact us, and sometimes, having been in many libraries, we have our own interests. There's a group of scholars whom we work with frequently. Some are interested in manuscripts of a particular area. Some are interested in other things, other objects like maps. And we've done a lot of work in maps, especially early modern, late medieval, early modern maps at the time of the discovery of the New World.
Right, that's Martellus. How do you say it?
Martellus Map, the Martellus Map.
And what did you find on that particular map?
Well, the Martellus Map was made probably in 1491. And the scholar that we're working with, who's a member of the Lazarus Project, Chet van Duzer, had suspected that this map was something that Christopher Columbus had consulted before coming to what eventually turned out to be the New World. And he'd worked on the Valsemelon map at the Library of Congress. And of course, my colleagues had also imaged that one as well. So we had some experience with maps, and I'd also imaged another Valsemelon map in 2010. So we had some interesting connections, or thought that there were some connections between Martellus and Valsemelon. And this map held at the Beinecke Library in Yale was almost entirely legible. It looked like, vaguely blue and then a beige gray. And it was about 7 feet by 4 feet. And it had some writing on it, but most of it, I would say, was entirely legible. And we imaged it in tiles over a course of a couple of weeks. And we were able to radically transform that map. Now, an enormous amount is legible. And Chet Van Duzer, after about 4 years, published a book just about a year and a half ago on the map, and has, radically, it has enabled him to confirm indeed that Columbus thought that he was in Japan simply because of the shape of Japan on the Martellus and what he was drawing when he was looking at Cuba. So that's been a crucial project in the history of cartography and discovery as well, and a fascinating project itself.
But they had to pass through the Muslim sort of areas and then be retranslated back out to
if they were Greek,
Latin.
maybe. For Latin tradition, they're going to stay in Western Europe, and they would be passed down, by scribe copying from one exemplar to the next over years. And that's usually what we get. We usually get medieval manuscripts. Mm-hmm. The Codex Gregoriensis from the first half of the 4th century. That's one of the earliest things we've done. But are we going to find something new? If we do, we may do so, I hope, this summer. We are probably going to be traveling to Verona, and Verona has a brilliant library, which ages ago, the 15th century poet laureate of Italy, Petrarch, had sent someone to Verona looking for the last chapters of Cicero's De Republica on
Boy,
politics.
that would be great to find.
Yeah. And they found it.
Oh, really?
They found it. Petrarch found it in a manuscript in Verona. Mm. Another thing that we like to do, and it's a different technology, infrared thermography, is to look at old bindings of manuscripts. Bindings of manuscripts, especially medieval bindings, often used stuffing paper from other manuscripts had lying around.
Wow.
And there are ways to look inside without destroying the object. Look inside the manuscript, look through the outer cover, the leather, into these binding papers, and discover new texts. Wow. If we're going to discover a new Ovid or Virgil, then that's where I think it would be.
I mean, think of all the things that were thrown away, right? So all the things that were just, okay, it's a rough draft, or it's the first, I mean, that's kind of amazing. I want to ask you something. You've talked before around the excitement of bringing students and the difference between, reading a book and then seeing it come to life. Like, what is this approach that you've worked on? How does it change the way that students and scholars relate to the past? Because, that's the question.
Well, students are used to studying literature or history in books, in modern editions. They usually don't do any kind of primary research in archives. If they're lucky, they have professors who may take them to the local archives at a library and can find all kinds of remarkable things. But often archives are a jumble. They're not well cataloged objects. You really have to know what you're doing in an archive. So you have to know a little bit about books. Manuscripts, of course, are even harder to read. So even if students got into an archive, often they wouldn't be able to read even, say, English from a couple of hundred years ago. So what I'm trying to do is create research opportunities for them, for undergraduates, primary research opportunities, by giving them a few skills, teaching them how to read ancient writing, paleography, and then recover and recognize objects for what they are, and recover them and transcribe them and understand them. And some of them are modern. And, we've worked on everything from, burnt poems of William Faulkner to...
No, in the Faulkner thing, you got the left hand and you only have readings of the right hand?
Oh, I see what yeah. One of the Faulkner images that we had taken was of a poem which had his fingerprint on it. And one of the things we're particularly interested in is fingerprints, because fingerprints have been left by scribes all the way back to Egyptian scribes. And there's a great example of a fingerprint by a late medieval, early Renaissance Italian painter in a manuscript by Petrarch, and we found the guy's fingerprints. It can also help you establish provenance, who did it. So the lawyer who's in charge of the Faulkner's papers and the Faulkner's the Faulkner's estate was particularly interested in discovering a means to identify Faulkner's things that belong to Faulkner via his fingerprints. They didn't have his fingerprints.
So,
we found one of them. And unfortunately it was his left hand. And so...
Why is it unfortunate? Was he right-handed?
No, because the only thing they have to measure it is the only example they have is of the right hand. And they found the left hand.
Yeah, we had to match it to Faulkner. We had to be able to figure out that it was he. And what we did was we took rifle shells that we knew that Faulkner had loaded himself, because no one else was allowed to teach his rifle, touch his rifle. And we were able to lift using cyanoacrylate and also imaging. We were able to lift his fingerprints off that, but the left hand and the right hand don't match. So it was unfortunate. But and here's important, and I'm not sure if I'm getting in trouble, but there is a fingerprint on one version of the Gettysburg Address at the Library of Congress. And I would very much like to figure out if that's Lincoln's by matching it to the pewter fob or his watch fingerprints, if we could lift it off that, again, using imaging.
Although it'd be very strange it'd be very strange if it turned out that it was Faulkner's.
Well, that would be...
It would be worse if it turned out to be one of the conservators. Very important.
Yeah.
So
I would say get on that one right away.
But
I'm not sure he'll let us do it, but that kind of approach is really interesting. It gives you a sense of how you can put together a history of who owned what.
So Petrarch going to Verona, are you going to be looking around for any Dante? See if you find a Dante notebook while you're there.
Well, we've discovered early Dante palimpsests. In fact, 2 years ago in Germany, we found a annotated manuscript of the Commedia, which was badly damaged, and no one had read it before, and it had all kinds of really valuable commentary in the margins. And scholars are working on that now.
Is that public, or is that could I see that or no?
Yeah, I could show it to you. It's not that scholars haven't finished working on it, but it's not. I mean, some of the things that we do are rarely, but under embargo.
If it's embargoed, it's embargoed. But obviously, we know nothing about how he wrote the comedy. So if there's things in the margins, it would be incredibly interesting to understand his thought process.
Yeah, it wasn't his own hand. It was written about 60 years afterwards, so it's a copy.
Right.
The group of Dantisti, early Dantisti, commenting on the text, that's as well.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Why do we look back? Why is it so important to get Ovid or the Bible or why is it important to get this history right? And what does conservation mean in the future?
Facts matter. History matters. Often history has been criticized as the narrative of the victors. But good historical work tells a story which is scientific, which can go against the received narrative and give us insights that we can't have any other way. If we look at a manuscript which has been rewritten in the author's hand, for example, we have insight into that person's mind in a way that no other object can give you. History doesn't usually record that, but material science gives us access to that. Cultural heritage objects belong to everyone. Just because it's a piece of a classical work or a Quran or a Bible doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us all. Our collective history is invested in these objects. And one of the things we need to be able to do is make that public and give people access to seeing those objects, because it connects them to facts, to truths, to history in a way that makes it real and makes it compelling and important. And it brings us also together that are important to two or more traditions simultaneously. Cultures that may be at odds with each other, but unite over an object. Think of the Bible. Yeah. So that's really important to be able to give people equal access to, and understand really where it comes from.
This was tremendous. If people want to follow along with your work more closely, is there a place they can go to sort of see it? And
yes, we're launching a new website very soon. And we're also launching with it a new 3D viewer with a variety of objects. And it also allows mixed reality and virtual reality goggles, and should be a lot of fun, and it would be for everyone. That site is going to be radically updated in the next few weeks, and should be a lot of interest for students of any age and people who are interested.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. This was really tremendous, these insights, and thank you so much for doing this work.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
Yeah.